The silver locket dangled from the hangman's noose as the crowd gathered beneath the scaffold, their faces twisted with righteous fury as they awaited the execution of Eliza Sinclair, the woman who supposedly poisoned her husband with arsenic-laced tea on a bitter winter morning in 1879. Utica, Montana had never witnessed such a scandal, and the townsfolk were hungry for justice, or what they believed was justice. Eliza stood trembling on the wooden platform, her once vibrant auburn hair now hanging limp around her pale face, her green eyes reflecting nothing but terror. At 32, she had expected to spend many more years with her husband, not be accused of murdering him. She clutched her hands together, the iron shackles cutting into her wrists as the sheriff read the charges against her. "I didn't do it," she whispered, though no one bothered to listen. No one except for the tall stranger leaning against the livery stable, his keen gray eyes narrowed beneath his weathered Stetson. Yates Nolan had ridden into Utica just 3 days prior, dust-covered and weary from the trail. He had come to deliver a herd of cattle from Wyoming, not to get involved in a murder case. Yet something about the woman's desperate eyes called to him, stirred something deep within his chest that he couldn't ignore. "Execution to be carried out at dawn tomorrow," announced Sheriff Miller, a portly man with a thick mustache that twitched when he spoke. "Unless Providence sees fit to reveal new evidence." The crowd murmured their approval, already convinced of Eliza's guilt. After all, she was the one who had prepared her husband's final meal, who had the most to gain from his substantial mining investments. The trial had been swift, with damning testimony from her husband's business partner and the discovery of arsenic in her kitchen cabinet. As the guards led Eliza back to her cell, Yates pushed himself away from the wall. At 35, he had seen enough of the world to know that things weren't always what they seemed. He had tracked rustlers across 3 territories, fought in range wars, and even spent a year as a deputy in Colorado. His instincts had saved his life more times than he could count, and right now, those instincts were screaming that something wasn't right about this case. "Excuse me," he said, approaching the sheriff as the crowd dispersed. "Mind if I ask a few questions about the prisoner?" Sheriff Miller eyed him suspiciously. "You know her or something?" "No, sir, just passing through. But I've seen a fair share of guilty folks in my time, and that woman doesn't have the look." The sheriff snorted. "Well, Mr. Nolan, Yates Nolan. Well, Mr. Nolan, looks can be deceiving. We found the arsenic in her home, and her husband's business partner confirmed they'd been fighting something fierce in the weeks before his death." The sheriff shook his head. "Open and shut case if you ask me. Mind if I speak with her?" "What for?" Yates shrugged. "Curiosity, I suppose." "I was heading out tomorrow, but I can spare a few hours. Something doesn't sit right." The sheriff hesitated, then relented with a sigh. "Fine. Can't see what harm it would do now, but keep it brief. She's to be hanged at dawn, and I won't have anyone giving her false hope." The jail was a small stone building with 3 cells, only one of which was occupied. Eliza sat on a narrow cot, her eyes fixed on a patch of sunlight streaming through the barred window. She didn't look up when Yates entered. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said softly. She raised her head slowly, regarding him with wary eyes. "If you've come to gawk at the condemned woman, you can leave. I've had enough of being a spectacle. Actually, I'm here because I think there might be more to your story than what the court heard." A flicker of hope crossed her face before being quickly suppressed. "Why would you care? You don't know me." "No, madam, I don't. But I've known injustice when I've seen it, and something about your case troubles me." He removed his hat, revealing a shock of dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "My name's Yates Nolan. I'd like to hear your side of things if you're willing to tell it." Eliza studied him for a long moment, as if searching for some hidden motive. Finally, she sighed. "What do you want to know, Mr. Nolan? Start with your husband. What was he like?" Thomas was. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He was ambitious. Came to Montana during the gold rush 15 years ago, built a successful mining operation. "We married 5 years ago after my father died and left me with debts I couldn't pay." She met his gaze directly. "It wasn't a love match, but we were comfortable together. He was fair to me, if somewhat distant." "And these fights the sheriff mentioned," her lips tightened. Thomas was having trouble with his business partner, Victor Hargrove. They disagreed about expanding the mine. Victor wanted to invest in new equipment, take on more debt. Thomas was more cautious. The arguments became heated, but they were business disagreements, not personal ones. "Why would Hargrove claim you and your husband were fighting?" "Because." She hesitated. "Because Victor had been making advances toward me for months. I rejected him, and I believe he resented me for it. When I told Thomas about Victor's behavior, he confronted him." "That was 3 weeks before Thomas died." Yates nodded, processing this information. "The arsenic they found in your home, where was it kept?" "In a locked cabinet in the pantry. Thomas used it occasionally for vermin control at the mine. I never touched it." Her voice broke. "They're saying I put it in his tea, but I would never." She stopped, composing herself with visible effort. "I loved him in my own way, Mr. Nolan. I had no reason to want him dead." "Did your husband leave everything to you in his will?" "No." Eliza's answer surprised him. "The mine goes to Victor with a stipend for me. Thomas believed Victor knew the business better than I ever could." She laughed bitterly. "If I had killed my husband for money, I certainly didn't plan it well." Yates leaned against the iron bars, his mind working rapidly. "Who else was in your house the morning your husband died?" "Just the maid, Clara. She comes in 3 times a week to help with cleaning, and Victor stopped by briefly to discuss business with Thomas." Her eyes widened suddenly. "Wait, there was something else. Thomas received a letter that morning. He seemed upset after reading it, but he wouldn't tell me what it said. He put it in his desk drawer and said he needed to think." "Where is this letter now?" "I don't know. When the sheriff searched our home after Thomas died, I never thought to mention it." She stood abruptly, moving to the bars. "Mr. Nolan, I'm going to hang tomorrow for a crime I didn't commit. If you truly believe there's more to this story, please help me." Their eyes met, and Yates felt something stir within him, a determination that went beyond mere curiosity. This woman was about to die for something she didn't do. He was sure of it now. "I'll do what I can, Mrs. Sinclair," he promised, "starting with a visit to your home if the sheriff will allow it." Sheriff Miller was reluctant, but eventually agreed to let Yates examine the Sinclair house, accompanied by a deputy. The house stood on the edge of town, a handsome 2-story structure that spoke of prosperity without ostentation. Inside, everything was neat and orderly, eerily preserved as it had been on the day Thomas Sinclair took his last breath. "The body was found there," the deputy said, pointing to a chair at the dining table, "slumped over his breakfast. The doctor said he'd been poisoned with arsenic." Yates nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "And where's the desk Mrs. Sinclair mentioned? The one with her husband's papers?" The deputy led him to a small study off the main room. A mahogany desk stood against one wall, its surface cleared except for an inkwell and blotter. Yates began opening drawers, methodically searching through papers. "Hey now, the sheriff said you could look around, not go through private papers," the deputy protested. "I'm looking for a letter Mr. Sinclair received the morning he died," Yates explained, continuing his search. "Mrs. Sinclair thinks it might be important." The deputy frowned but didn't stop him. In the bottom drawer, Yates found a leather folder containing several letters, all addressed to Thomas Sinclair. Most were business correspondence, but one caught his eye: a personal letter with no return address, dated the day of Sinclair's death. He carefully unfolded it and read, "Thomas, I can remain silent no longer. Your partner has been falsifying the mine's production records for months, skimming profits and blaming lower yields on exhausted veins. He believes you are unaware, but I have seen the books he keeps hidden. Confront him if you must, but be cautious. Such men are dangerous when cornered." A concerned employee, Yates, refolded the letter, his pulse quickening. If Thomas had confronted Hargrove about embezzlement on the morning of his death, it would give the business partner a powerful motive for murder. "I need to see the mine office," he told the deputy. "And I'd like to speak with Victor Hargrove." The Silver Creek mine office was a sturdy clapboard building near the mine entrance, about a mile from town. Victor Hargrove was there when Yates arrived, reviewing ledgers with a clerk. He was a tall, well-dressed man in his 40s, with a carefully trimmed beard and cold eyes that narrowed when the deputy introduced Yates. "What's this about?" Hargrove demanded. "I've already given my testimony at the trial." "Just clearing up a few details," Yates said casually. "You were at the Sinclair home the morning Thomas died, correct?" "Briefly, yes. We had business matters to discuss." Hargrove's tone was clipped. "I left before he had breakfast." "Did he mention receiving any concerning letters that morning?" Something flickered in Hargrove's eyes. "No." "Why would he?" "Just curious. I understand you inherited control of the mine after his death." "It was Thomas's wish," Hargrove said stiffly. "We built this operation together from nothing. His wife knew nothing about mining." Yates nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to see the production records for the past year, if you don't mind." "I most certainly do mind," Hargrove snapped. "Those are private business documents. You have no authority to examine them." The deputy shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Nolan is just trying to make sure justice is done, Mr. Hargrove. Mrs. Sinclair is set to hang tomorrow." "And rightfully so," Hargrove said. "She poisoned her husband. The evidence was clear." "Then you won't mind if I speak with your employees," Yates said. "Particularly whoever handles the record keeping." Hargrove's face tightened. "This is harassment. I'll be speaking with Sheriff Miller about this." He turned to the clerk. "Benjamin, show these gentlemen out. I have work to do." As they left the office, Yates noticed a young man watching them from the mine entrance. When their eyes met, the man quickly looked away, but not before Yates caught a glimpse of his worried expression. "Who's that?" he asked the deputy. "Edward Jenkins. Works as an assayer for the mine. Tests the ore samples." Yates changed direction, heading toward the young man, who looked like he wanted to flee but stood his ground. "Mr. Jenkins," Yates said, "I'd like a word with you." The assayer glanced nervously toward the office where Hargrove had disappeared. "I don't know anything about Mrs. Sinclair or what happened to Mr. Sinclair." "I didn't ask about that," Yates pointed out. "Interesting that it's the first thing on your mind, though." Jenkins swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "The truth." "Did you write a letter to Thomas Sinclair about discrepancies in the mine's production records?" The young man's face drained of color. "How did you?" "I found it in his desk." "You didn't sign your name, but you knew something was wrong with the books, didn't you?" Jenkins looked around anxiously, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Hargrove would fire me if he knew I sent that letter, or worse." "Worse how?" Yates pressed. "Mr. Sinclair confronted him that morning. I wasn't there, but one of the miners overheard them arguing in the office. Later that day, Mr. Hargrove told us Mr. Sinclair had taken ill suddenly." Jenkins lowered his voice. "When I heard Mr. Sinclair had died and they were accusing Mrs. Sinclair, I wanted to speak up, but I was afraid. Mr. Hargrove has connections in this town, and I have a family to support." "You're speaking up now," Yates observed. Jenkins straightened his shoulders. Because an innocent woman is about to hang. I should have said something sooner, but I convinced myself it wasn't my business. I can't live with that on my conscience anymore. Would you be willing to testify to what you know, if it would help Mrs. Sinclair? Yes. Jenkins nodded firmly. There's more. Mr. Hargrove keeps a separate set of books in his private safe, the real production figures. I've seen them when he thought no one was looking. Yates turned to the deputy. We need to get back to town and talk to the sheriff, and I need to see Clara, the Sinclair's maid. She might have seen something important that morning. Clara Wilson lived in a small house near the church. She was a middle-aged woman with a careworn face who seemed surprised to receive visitors, especially ones asking about the Sinclair case. I've said everything I know already, she told them, reluctantly inviting them into her modest parlor. Mrs. Sinclair prepared her husband's tea that morning, same as always. Did you see her put anything in it? Yates asked directly. Clara hesitated. Well, no. I was cleaning the front rooms while she was in the kitchen. So you didn't actually witness Mrs. Sinclair poisoning the tea? No, but she was the only one who could have done it, Clara insisted. Mr. Sinclair was fine when I arrived, and Mr. Hargrove only stayed a few minutes in the study with him. Yates leaned forward. Did you see Mr. Hargrove near the kitchen at any time? Clara frowned, thinking back. Well, he did ask for a glass of water before he left. I was dusting the bookshelves, so Mrs. Sinclair told him to help himself from the kitchen. So Hargrove was alone in the kitchen where the tea was being prepared, only for a minute or two, but... Clara's eyes widened as she realized the implication. Oh my goodness, I never thought, what about the arsenic? Where was it kept? In a locked cabinet in the pantry. Mr. Sinclair kept the key in his desk. She paused. But now that I think of it, I noticed the cabinet was unlocked a few days before, when I was cleaning the pantry shelves. I meant to mention it to Mrs. Sinclair but forgot. Yates exchanged a look with the deputy. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. You've been very helpful. With this new information, they hurried back to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Miller listened skeptically as Yates laid out what he had discovered. The letter about Hargrove's embezzlement, Jenkins's testimony about the argument on the morning of the murder, Hargrove's opportunity to tamper with the tea, and the unlocked arsenic cabinet. It's all circumstantial, the sheriff pointed out. Nothing solid enough to stop an execution. Then let me search Hargrove's office, Yates urged. Jenkins says there's a second set of books in his safe that would prove the embezzlement. That gives Hargrove a powerful motive to kill Sinclair. The sheriff scratched his chin thoughtfully. I can't authorize a search without more evidence. The judge wouldn't approve it. By the time we get that evidence, Mrs. Sinclair will be dead, Yates argued, frustration evident in his voice. At least postpone the execution. On what grounds? The word of a cowboy passing through town and a scared assayer who didn't speak up at the trial. Sheriff Miller shook his head. I'm sorry, Mr. Nolan, but unless you bring me solid proof before dawn, there's nothing I can do. Yates left the sheriff's office, his mind racing. He had less than 12 hours to find the evidence that would save Eliza Sinclair's life. He couldn't wait for legal authorization to search Hargrove's office. He would have to take matters into his own hands. As darkness fell over Utica, Yates made his way back to the mine office. The building was dark, everyone having gone home for the night. Using the skills he had learned during his more questionable years on the frontier, he picked the lock on the back door and slipped inside. Striking a match, he located Hargrove's private office and began his search. The safe wasn't difficult to find, a sturdy iron box built into the wall behind a painting of the mine in its early days. Getting it open would be the challenge. Yates pressed his ear to the safe and carefully turned the dial, listening for the telltale clicks that would reveal the combination. It was slow, painstaking work, and twice he had to start over. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the lock released and the safe door swung open. Inside, he found exactly what Jenkins had described: a second ledger showing the mine's true production figures, significantly higher than what had been reported officially. There were also several letters between Hargrove and a buyer in Helena, arranging for the sale of gold that never appeared in the official records. It was damning evidence of embezzlement, but Yates needed more to connect Hargrove to the murder. He continued searching the safe and found a small vial tucked into the back corner. Carefully removing it, he held it up to his match light. The label clearly read arsenic, and the vial was half empty. Why would Hargrove keep arsenic in his office safe, unless he had taken it from the Sinclair home? Pocketing the vial and the incriminating documents, Yates was preparing to leave when he heard the office door open. He quickly extinguished his match and pressed himself against the wall beside the door to Hargrove's office. "I know someone's in here," came Hargrove's voice, followed by the metallic click of a revolver being cocked. "Show yourself." Yates remained silent, calculating his options. He could hear Hargrove moving cautiously through the outer office, approaching the door where he was hidden. "I figured someone might try something," Hargrove continued. "That cowboy asking too many questions. Should have minded his own business." As Hargrove stepped into the doorway, Yates made his move, lunging forward to knock the gun from the man's hand. Hargrove let out a startled shout as the weapon clattered to the floor, but he recovered quickly, throwing a punch that caught Yates on the jaw. The two men grappled in the darkness, crashing against the desk and sending papers flying. Hargrove was strong, but Yates had years of hard living behind him and the determination of a man fighting for more than just himself. He landed a solid blow to Hargrove's midsection, followed by another to his face that sent the mine owner sprawling. Hargrove scrambled for his fallen gun, but Yates reached it first, kicking it across the room. "It's over, Hargrove," he said, breathing heavily. "I found your real ledgers and the arsenic you took from Sinclair's home. You killed him when he confronted you about the embezzlement, then framed his wife." "You can't prove anything," Hargrove spat, blood trickling from his split lip. "The letter from Jenkins, your argument with Sinclair the morning he died, your opportunity to poison the tea, and now this." Yates patted his pocket where the vial rested. "I'd say that's enough for Sheriff Miller to postpone tomorrow's hanging, wouldn't you?" Hargrove's expression darkened. "You think anyone will take your word over mine? I'm a respected businessman. You're nobody, just a drifter." "Maybe so, but evidence speaks for itself." Yates moved toward the door, keeping his eyes on Hargrove. "Let's go have a talk with the sheriff." Hargrove lunged suddenly, a concealed derringer appearing in his hand. Yates dove to the side as the small gun fired, the bullet splintering the doorframe next to his head. Before Hargrove could fire again, Yates tackled him, and they crashed through the window in a shower of glass, landing hard on the ground outside. The derringer flew from Hargrove's grasp as Yates pinned him down, landing punch after punch until the mine owner stopped struggling. Lights were coming on in nearby buildings, people drawn by the sounds of the fight and the gunshot. "What in tarnation is going on here?" Sheriff Miller demanded, arriving with his deputy. He took in the scene: the broken window, the bloodied Hargrove, and Yates standing over him with torn clothes and glass cuts. "Sheriff, I've got your evidence," Yates said, pulling the vial and documents from his pocket. "Hargrove was embezzling from the mine. Sinclair found out and confronted him. Hargrove poisoned him and framed Mrs. Sinclair." The sheriff examined the items, his expression growing grave. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Nolan." "He just tried to kill me when I confronted him," Yates added. "Seems like the action of a guilty man." Hargrove pushed himself to a sitting position, glaring at them. "This is absurd. He broke into my office. Anything he claims to have found was planted. Then you won't mind explaining why you have arsenic hidden in your safe," Sheriff Miller said, holding up the vial. "Or why your production records don't match the official ones." As the deputy handcuffed Hargrove, the mine owner's defiance crumbled. "Sinclair was going to ruin everything," he muttered. 15 years building that mine, and he was going to throw me to the wolves over a few accounting discrepancies. "You killed a man and nearly sent an innocent woman to the gallows," the sheriff said coldly. "Take him to the jail." As Hargrove was led away, Sheriff Miller turned to Yates. "Seems I owe you an apology, Mr. Nolan, and Mrs. Sinclair owes you her life." Dawn was breaking over the mountains when Eliza Sinclair walked out of the jail, free for the first time in weeks. She looked stunned, as if unable to believe her reprieve was real. When she saw Yates waiting for her, something changed in her expression, a softening, a glimmer of gratitude mixed with something deeper. "Mr. Nolan," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "The sheriff told me what you did. How you risked your life to uncover the truth." "Couldn't let an innocent woman hang," he replied simply, suddenly awkward in her presence now that the urgency of saving her life had passed. "What happens now?" she asked, looking around the town that had been so quick to condemn her. "That depends on you, Mrs. Sinclair. The sheriff says your house is still yours, and with Hargrove's confession, the court will likely award you your husband's share of the mine." She shook her head slowly. "I don't want the mine. Too many bitter memories now, I think. I'd like to start fresh somewhere else." She looked at him curiously. "The sheriff mentioned you were just passing through Utica. Where were you headed?" "Nowhere in particular," Yates admitted. "I've been drifting for years, taking work where I can find it. Would you?" She hesitated. "Would you stay a few days? Help me sort through my affairs here before I leave. I'd pay you, of course. No need for payment. I'd be happy to help." He offered her his arm. "Shall I walk you home, Mrs. Sinclair?" "Eliza," she corrected him, taking his arm. "After what you've done for me, I think you've earned the right to use my given name." Over the next week, Yates helped Eliza settle her affairs in Utica. He assisted her in selling the house, negotiating with the bank, and making arrangements for her portion of the mine's ownership to be sold. The town's attitude toward her had shifted dramatically, many offering apologies for their rush to judgment, others keeping a shamefaced distance. They spent long evenings talking, getting to know each other beyond the extraordinary circumstances of their meeting. Yates told her about his years on the frontier, the good and the bad, while she shared stories of her childhood in St. Louis and the events that had led her to Montana. "I never really loved Thomas," she confessed one evening as they sat on the porch of her soon-to-be former home. "Not romantically. He was kind to me when my father died, offered me security when I had nowhere to turn. We were companions, partners in a way, but there was always something missing." Yates nodded, understanding. "And now, what will you do with your freedom?" "I've decided to go to California," she said. "San Francisco, perhaps. Somewhere by the ocean, where I can build a new life far from here." He felt an unexpected pang at the thought of her leaving, though he had always known she would. Their paths had crossed by chance. There was no reason to expect they would continue in the same direction. "When do you leave?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "The stage goes west on Tuesday." She turned to look at him directly. "What about you, Yates? Where will you go?" he shrugged. "Back on the trail, I suppose. Maybe head up to Montana's gold country, see if there's work there." Eliza was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "You could come to California. I hear they need good men there too." Their eyes met, and Yates felt something shift between them, a possibility opening up that he hadn't allowed himself to consider. Are you asking me to come with you, Eliza? I'm suggesting that perhaps both of us have been adrift long enough, she replied carefully. You saved my life, Yates. In doing so, you've shown me what kind of man you are: honorable, determined, willing to fight for what's right even when it would be easier to walk away. I'm just a cowhand, he said. A drifter with not much to offer a woman like you. She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. A woman like me? You mean a widow starting over with nothing but the money from a sold house and painful memories. You're educated, refined. You could have your pick of suitors in San Francisco. Perhaps I don't want refined. She reached out hesitantly and touched his hand. Perhaps I want someone real. Someone who sees me as I am, not as convenient or profitable. The touch of her hand sent warmth through him, a feeling he had almost forgotten was possible. California's a long way, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Would be a shame to make that journey alone. Tuesday dawned clear and warm, the stagecoach waiting at the town's only hotel to begin its westward journey. Yates stood beside it, helping the driver secure luggage on top, his own meager belongings among them. Eliza emerged from the hotel, wearing a simple traveling dress of deep blue, her auburn hair neatly arranged beneath a modest hat. She looked different from the desperate woman he had first seen on the scaffold, younger somehow, unburdened, her green eyes clear and focused on the future. Ready? He asked as she approached. More than ready, she replied. Though I must admit, I never imagined leaving Utica like this, free with a new companion, heading toward a completely unknown future. Having second thoughts, she shook her head firmly. Not one. Are you? Only thought in my head is that I'm the luckiest man in Montana to be traveling with you, he said honestly. The driver called for passengers to board, and Yates helped Eliza into the coach. As they settled onto the leather seat, their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining. San Francisco won't know what hit it, Yates said with a smile. Neither will we, Eliza replied, returning his smile with a warmth that made his heart skip. But I think that's the beauty of it. As the stagecoach pulled away from Utica, leaving behind the place that had nearly ended Eliza's life, Yates felt a certainty he had never known before. The road ahead was long, and their future together uncertain, but for the first time in years, he wasn't just drifting, he was moving towards something, with someone who saw him clearly and chose him anyway. The journey to San Francisco took nearly 3 weeks, traveling by stagecoach, riverboat, and finally the newly completed transcontinental railroad. They arrived in the bustling city in early summer of 1879, greeted by fog-shrouded hills and the salty tang of ocean air. Eliza had used her contacts, a distant cousin who had moved west years earlier, to secure temporary lodgings near Portsmouth Square. It was a modest apartment above a bookstore, but it offered views of the bay when the fog cleared, and it represented something precious to both of them: a fresh start. The city was everything Utica was not: cosmopolitan, diverse, pulsing with energy and opportunity. Chinese immigrants worked alongside Irish laborers, Mexican merchants traded with ship captains from around the world, and everywhere there was the sense of a place still defining itself, still growing. For someone like Yates, used to the open range and small frontier towns, the adjustment was jarring at first. But he was adaptable by nature, and seeing Eliza's excitement as she explored her new home made the transition easier. "What do you think?" she asked one evening as they walked along the waterfront, watching ships come and go in the harbor. "Is San Francisco everything you imagined?" "It's certainly louder," he replied with a smile. "More crowded, but there's something about it, a feeling that anything's possible here." "Exactly." Her face lit up with enthusiasm. No one knows us here, Yates. We can be whoever we want to be. And who do you want to be, Eliza Sinclair? She considered the question seriously. I want to be useful, independent, happy. She glanced at him. What about you? I want to be worthy of the second chance I've been given, he said simply. Worthy of you. Their relationship had deepened during their journey west, but they had maintained a proper distance, acutely aware of Eliza's recent widowhood and the newness of their connection. They had separate rooms in the apartment, though many evenings were spent in the small parlor, talking long into the night. Finding work was Yates's first priority. He had some savings, but not enough to live on indefinitely. His experience with cattle was of limited use in a city, but his years on the frontier had taught him many skills. Within a week, he found employment at the docks, using his strength and quick mind to advance quickly from simple laborer to foreman of a loading crew. Eliza, meanwhile, used her education to secure a position as a teacher's assistant at a school for young women. She had trained as a teacher before her marriage, but had never practiced the profession. Now, she found satisfaction in helping young women learn, in encouraging them toward independence she herself had only recently claimed. As weeks turned to months, they settled into a comfortable routine. They would part ways each morning for their respective jobs, then meet in the evening to share meals and stories of their day. On Sundays, they explored the city together, discovering hidden gardens, elegant restaurants, and spectacular views from the city's many hills. One Sunday in late autumn, they ventured to Golden Gate Park, a relatively new addition to the city. The day was unusually clear, the fog having retreated to sea, leaving behind blue skies and sunshine that illuminated the fall colors of the park. They spread a blanket beneath a sprawling oak tree and unpacked the picnic lunch Eliza had prepared. As they ate, Yates found himself watching her more than the scenery, the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the animation in her face as she described her students, the grace in her movements. "You're staring," she observed, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Can't help it," he admitted. "You're more beautiful than the park." The blush deepened, but she didn't look away. "Yates, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." "Sounds serious." "It is, in a way." She set aside her plate and smoothed her skirt nervously. "We've been living as friends these past months. Good friends, certainly, but, he prompted when she hesitated. "But I find myself wanting more than friendship from you," she said finally, meeting his eyes with characteristic directness. "And I hope you might feel the same way." Yates felt his heart quicken. "I do, Eliza. Have from almost the first moment I saw you." He reached for her hand. "But I wanted to give you time. After everything you'd been through, the last thing you needed was a man pushing his attentions on you." "I appreciate that consideration," she said softly, "but I'm ready now if you still want to pursue whatever this is between us." "I want that more than anything," he said honestly. "But I have to ask, would you be content with a man like me? I'm not wealthy or educated like your late husband. I work with my hands, and while I'm doing well enough now, I can't promise you the kind of life you had before." Eliza squeezed his hand. "The life I had before nearly got me hanged," she reminded him with a wry smile. "I don't want wealth or status, Yates. I want a partner who respects me, who sees me as an equal, someone I can trust with my heart." "You can trust me with anything," he promised. "Your heart, your secrets, your future. I may not be perfect, but I'll never let you down the way others have." She moved closer to him on the blanket, her eyes never leaving his. "Then perhaps it's time we stopped pretending to be only friends." When his lips met hers for the first time, Yates felt as though his entire life had been leading to this moment, every hardship, every lonely mile on the trail, every fight and failure and small victory. all of it worth it for the chance to hold Eliza in his arms, to feel her respond to him with a passion that matched his own. They were married 2 months later in a small ceremony at Grace Cathedral, with only a few friends in attendance, colleagues from the docks, teachers from Eliza's school, and her cousin, who had initially welcomed them to the city. It was nothing like Eliza's first wedding, which had been a social event in Utica, attended by the town's prominent citizens. This ceremony was intimate, genuine, a true reflection of the love that had grown between them. With their combined savings, they were able to purchase a small house on a hillside overlooking the city, nothing grand, but solid and welcoming, with enough space for the future they both hoped to build. Mrs. Nolan, Yates said as he carried her across the threshold of their new home on their wedding night. "How does it sound?" "Perfect," she replied, her arms around his neck, her eyes shining with happiness. "Absolutely perfect." Life settled into a new rhythm for the Nolans. Yates continued to advance at the shipping company, eventually being promoted to oversee all loading operations at one of the city's busiest piers. Eliza completed her certification and became a full teacher at the Young Women's Academy, specializing in literature and history. They made friends in their neighborhood, hosted dinner parties in their modest home, and gradually built the kind of life neither had dared hope for before their paths crossed in Utica. They were not wealthy by San Francisco standards, but they were comfortable, respected, and most importantly, deeply happy together. In the spring of 1881, Eliza discovered she was expecting their first child. Yates's reaction, a mixture of joy, terror, and overwhelming love, only deepened her affection for him. He treated her with tenderness during her pregnancy, taking on extra household duties without being asked, reading books about childbirth and infant care, and spending evenings talking to her growing belly. Their son, Thomas Yates Nolan, was born on a stormy December night, a healthy, robust boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined expression. As Yates held his son for the first time, he felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. "He's perfect," he whispered, sitting beside Eliza on their bed, the baby cradled in his arms, just like his mother. Eliza smiled tiredly. "I was thinking he looks like his father, strong, handsome." Yates leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you for our son, for our life together." "For everything." "No," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else would, for fighting for the truth when it would have been easier to ride away. Everything we have because you stopped that day in Utica." As little Thomas grew, so did their family. A daughter, Emma, joined them 2 years later, followed by another son, William, in 1885. Their house, once spacious for two, became comfortably full with the sounds of children's laughter, occasional tears, and the thousand small moments that make up a family's life. Yates proved to be a natural father, patient, loving, always ready with a story or a lesson drawn from his years on the frontier. Eliza balanced her teaching career with motherhood, finding that her work with young women gave her insights that helped with raising her own children. The shadow of Utica faded with time, though neither of them ever forgot how close they had come to never finding each other. Occasionally, news would reach them from Montana. Victor Hargrove had died in prison. The Silver Creek mine had changed hands. Utica itself was dwindling as the mining boom subsided. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Yates surprised Eliza with a silver locket, reminiscent of the one she had worn on that fateful day. But with a significant difference, this one contained miniature portraits of their children on one side and a tiny etching of a hangman's noose on the other. "To remember how precious life is," he explained when she questioned the unusual choice of decoration. How close we came to missing all of this. She wore the locket every day after that, a reminder not of tragedy averted but of happiness found against all odds. As their children grew and San Francisco entered a new century, Yates and Eliza Nolan became fixtures in their community, he as a respected businessman who had worked his way up from the docks to ownership of a small shipping company. She as a beloved teacher who had influenced a generation of young women. Their home remained a gathering place for family and friends, always warm with hospitality and love. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the city lights twinkled below their hillside home, they would often sit together on their porch, Eliza's head resting on Yates's shoulder, his arm around her, both of them marveling at the journey that had brought them together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped in Utica that day? Eliza asked on one such evening as they watched a fog bank roll through the Golden Gate. No, Yates answered without hesitation. I believe some things are meant to be, no matter how unlikely they seem. I was meant to find you, to save you, to love you. He squeezed her gently. And you were meant to save me right back. From what? She asked curiously. From a life without purpose, without roots. He turned to look at her, the love of 20 years evident in his eyes. From never knowing what it means to be truly home. Eliza reached up to touch his face, now lined with the marks of years lived fully, of laughter and worry and joy. Then we saved each other, she said softly, and every day we still do. As the fog enveloped the city below, wrapping their hillside in a private cloud, Yates kissed his wife with the same tenderness he had shown on their first kiss in Golden Gate Park 2 decades earlier. Some things changed with time, but not this, not the certainty that in each other they had found everything they had ever needed, from near tragedy in a Montana mining town to happiness in the hills of San Francisco. Their journey had been unexpected, sometimes difficult, but ultimately blessed. Two people who might never have met, whose lives might never have intertwined, had found in each other the love, respect, and partnership that neither had dared to hope for before that fateful day when a cowboy's instincts told him to fight for a condemned woman's life. And in that fight, they had both found redemption, second chances, and a love that would last all their days.